Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. We have a special guest joining us today. Darrell Thorp is here. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Mitch.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
You've got a amazing career going. 7 Grammy Awards.
Yes, I'm just lucky. I'm super fortunate.
Well, there's more than luck there. That's a lot of skill, that's preparation, that's a lot of hard work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Radiohead.
Yes.
Paul McCartney.
Yes.
Beck. Dwight Yokam.
Yep.
I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You've got a tremendous discography going as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I feel so fortunate, so lucky every time the phone rings. I'm like, oh, still working. Great.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Thank you.
So you started out from the recording side of things at the conservatory in Arizona, right?
Yeah, that was my first. That's where I went to school, trade school. So started there, and that was in '97. And it was a pretty short program back then, so it was only a couple months. And I did the course requirements, and then they require you to do, I don't remember, I think it was 80 hours of internship before you graduate. So, which is the big push to go and get a job at a studio or get a job at a label, some avenue that you're interested in pursuing. So I moved to LA immediately and got an internship at Track Record.
How did you get that internship?
The school had a great placement program. They were already working and trying to build relationships with studios and studio managers that would, hey, we have a new student, we have a bunch of new students to graduate, and some studio managers would be like, send me what you got, and some guys would be like, we need a little bit more, kids that seem a little bit more professional about them. So they would just try to match you. And so I interviewed at Track, and they hired me for the internship, and I did my 30 days of internship there, and then they hired me after my internship ended. So
nice.
Yeah.
And you were doing a lot of hip hop early on.
That was the hip hop days, yeah. Usually the Track Record had 2 rooms. It was the North and the South, and the South room, which was the SSL, was pretty much hip hop 24/7, and then the North room was tracking gigs of any sorts, and it was kind of the tail end of the 90s when a record budget would be, $100,000 or something like that, $150,000, but you still needed a studio to record in because it was still tape pretty much. So, so I learned a lot there. I really did. It got my feet wet, got me in the door. It was a great experience.
Yeah, trial by fire.
Trial by fire, totally.
Get thrown right in there.
Totally thrown right in there, yeah. I had a great time.
So you moved to Conway after that as an assistant, correct?
Yes, moved to Conway, worked at Conway for a year, and Conway was kind of like a step up, well, not kind of, it was a step up in clientele. Bigger budgets coming in all the time. Clientele spending a lot of money to be there every day, and Conway was known for its technical aspect, and so clients expected that. And I learned a ton at Conway. I learned a lot. I learned a lot more about the technical side of engineering, not the artistic or the craft side of engineering. I learned a lot about signal flow and SMPTE, when we had to pay attention to SMPTE, and word clock and syncing, blackbursts, locking several machines together. I learned so much of that. I still get friends calling me once in a while like, hey, Darrell, do you remember? I'm like, yeah, I think I do. Because it was so long ago, and we don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. But Conway was great.
But it's all that background stuff that goes into giving you the skill set that you now draw on.
Correct.
Having that background is something I think that's valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So were you, you're working as an assistant. How did you move into doing freelance and working on your own as a lead engineer?
When Nigel Godrich came to Ocean Way to do Travis, the Invisible Band was the second, that's their third record, but Nigel's second record. They cut that all at Ocean Way. And then he came back 6 months later, I believe it was, give-ish, to start Beck Sea Change. So I worked on that with him. And then he kept telling me, like, Darrell, I'm going to bring Radiohead here. So then he finally brought Radiohead. We started Hail the Thief in LA at Ocean Way. And then Nigel, he didn't have a day-to-day engineer, so he was like, man, would you like to come to England and continue this record? I'm like, heck yeah. So I jumped, and that's usually how it happens, just a producer or somebody usually gets to know you really well as you're working in when you're an employee of a studio. It's like, hey man, come work for me full-time, like as my engineer. And so that's how I made the jump.
Right. So tell us a little bit about differences of being a staff engineer and being a freelance engineer? How do you work differently? How do you approach that?
Well, a staff engineer is somebody. Now you can be a staff engineer and you can still engineer gigs or engineer projects for clients that rent the rooms out, or you can be like an assistant engineer, which is you're supposed to be the liaison between the client and the faculty of the studio. And your job is to know the ins and the outs of a room that a client is renting. So if a client says, hey, we need to do A, B, and C, you can go, well, I got option A, B, and C, D, E, and F for such and such location. And a lot of times it's usually, hey, we're cutting drums. What's the best corner for the drums? Oh, it sounds really good there, or it sounds really good over there. What do you like for? I really like over there. Let's set them up over there. That happens all the time in the studio. An engineer walks in, working at a room for the first time, and he's just like, he goes with the assistant's advice for that.
Right, sure. And so then the other side of that is being a freelance engineer. How is that different? How do you get work? How do you develop that career?
I mean, my work is just, honestly, a lot of my work comes from really good friends of mine who are fellow musicians or producers or both, and in LA, all over the country, all over the world, and that for that fact. And somebody is doing their record, and they know a mutual friend of mine, and they go, you know, I'm almost finished with my record. I need a good engineer to mix, or I need a good engineer to track. Who should I hire? And I owe my friends so many royalty checks, it's not funny. I mean, that's how I keep. And the same goes both ways. Whenever there's gigs for them, I try to throw their names in the hat. It's always this, because if on one hand, it's like looking at my resume is like, oh, wow, he's got a great discography, but you don't really know if I'm friendly or not, or kind of a cool guy. But when somebody who's a really good friend of mine recommends he's a great guy, really hard worker, and obviously he's good at what he does, so that's just a big, okay, cool, I'm going to call him. And so that's really how I get a lot of my work.
So that networking aspect
it's
of it
that
is still very
networking
important.
aspect. Yeah, even though I'm not trying to network, I'm not passing out my card. Like, it's just a total, and it's kind of how it happens for a lot of engineers as well. Same thing.
Right. Now you've moved more into producing.
A little bit.
Yeah. What is the difference between the two, and how did you make that shift?
I made the shift by just taking some chances on a few projects here and there to produce. Producing for me it's really hard work. It's a different mindset, and I'm usually having to produce and engineer at the same time, which is really taxing.
Right.
Producing and engineering, and then making sure you're in this constant communication with the artist all the time is a lot of work. It's really a heavy experience to do. Sometimes it's great and fun. Sometimes you're like, why did I do this? And then, but then a lot of the things that I've been fortunate enough to produce and work together on, I've been super proud of. Super proud of.
Right, absolutely. So do you prefer tracking, mixing, producing? Where does your heart lie?
My heart lies mostly in mixing. Lately, I like the freedom that it gives me as an engineer. Most of my clients, they send me files. They come by the first day. They drop a hard drive off, and they usually just say, "Darrell, do your thing, and then let us know when you." And I work at my own pace, and it's really freedom, and it's great because I can take a break when I need to take a break because my ears get fatigued after a while, or if I need to cut out a little bit early to go meet my wife for dinner or something like that. That's a great aspect of it, and the thrill of it's kind of fun to hear a track for the first time, which is interesting because it's kind of I don't really like to hear people's rough mixes or demos that much because I don't want to get influenced by it. I kind of want to hear the raw tracks as they're getting pushed up to make a balance. And then from there I get inspired to add things or subtract things or add delays or how much, if the track should be completely dry or with a lot of effects or very little effects, where I start making my decision process. That's kind of always how I've worked like that. And then, once in a while I'll check the rough to be like, hey, am I in the same game?
Right.
or am I completely out of whack?
Right.
Or to make sure that something is supposed to be there. Like that's usually how I approach it.
Right, right. So how do the tracks arrive to you? Are they tuned? Are they pocketed? Do you have to go in and do a lot of editing before you start mixing, or do you just start mixing right from the
I usually have to do the unfortunate factor of, and I understand and I get it. I came from a day of engineering when you would prep all your sessions to go to, if somebody was mixing the record, you would clean it all up and send it off to them as a neat palette. But a lot of people don't really understand a crossfade. And the reason they don't understand a crossfade is because they usually don't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I start EQing and compressing, then that bad vocal crossfade is like, and so I have to go through and kind of clean those edits up real quick.
Right.
But I'm really fast at it, so I kind of can do it really quickly.
Right, right. So you were here today,
Yes.
demoing a new microphone from Lauten Audio, which we want to talk about here in just a second. But I was interested in something you were demonstrating with a guitarist, vocalist, and you were talking about how you really like to use proximity effect on a microphone.
Yes, I do.
Why is that, and what does that give you?
Thickness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking for it in recording, no matter what you're doing. It is so much easier to make a big sound small than a small sound big.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can record it big and you need it to be smaller later on, it's just a little bit of a high pass.
Right.
Make it a little smaller. EQing the snot out of something to make it sound bigger only brings up the noise floor, brings out the room noise, however poorly it was recorded. You know, I'm using extreme examples there,
Sure.
but that is the case. So in the case of proximity, it's literally just because of that. I want to get that vocal, and it's always program dependent. It's like, what are we doing? If we're doing singer-songwriter with drums, bass, an acoustic guitar, like a Jack Johnson kind of thing or a Beck kind of thing, then yeah, I want that vocal to be as big as I can.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it was more of a pop thing, then I might actually try and thin it out a smidge so it'd be cutting through a track.
Right.
But that's usually why I'm always going for big.
Mm-hmm.
Bigger is more.
Right, right.
To me.
So when you're tracking, are you looking at that from a standpoint of, I'm going to have to mix this, or I want to deliver it this way to somebody who's going to mix it, or what is the factor there?
It totally depends. And there are situations when I'm hired just as an engineer and I know somebody else is going to mix it. So my thought process in tracking is a little bit more, I'm recording a little more neutral.
Okay.
If it's a project that I know I'm mixing, I'm going for it. I'm trying to make it sound as finished as I possibly can, minus rides and automation. That would just drive me nuts in a tracking situation.
Right, right. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So the microphone that I alluded to is the LA320. It's a brand new microphone from Lauten.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this microphone.
Well, it is the Series Black line, Lauten Audio 320. It's a fixed cardioid, and it's a tube mic. It has a very similar characteristic as a 67. It's similar to a 67. It's not like a 67 knockoff or anything like that, but it's very similar to that. The really cool thing about it is the price point is $499. So for a $500 tube microphone, holy cow.
Right.
Holy cow. It has now it's fixed pattern, which, hey, but the two really cool features that Brian came up with is he's calling them a high cut and a low cut for the simplicity of it, even though it's a high pass and a low pass technically.
Sure.
But so for the high cut and the low cut, so the high cut is a cut that happens at 12K. The theory behind his high cut was, if you're in a room that's not treated, it's really bright sounding, a lot of splash going on, you could turn the high cut on and help control some of that ambient noise a little bit. However, it's kind of serving a couple of purposes as well, which is sometimes depending on what kind of material you're singing, if you're a lot of S's, it does help control some of the sibilance a little bit. But also that high cut it kind of makes the mic sound more vintage, like little bit more like an older 67 or something like that. But it's not dark. You're not losing that air at all. It's still a bright microphone. It's really beautifully tuned very well on the top end.
Right.
And then of course he's got the low cut, which is at 150 hertz. First theory about that was more of an environment thing. You're in your garage, and then 2 doors down is the washing machine or the street noise, cars driving by.
Sure.
150 hertz, which sounds like a lot. So it's kind of taken away all that low end rumble, which you find in a lot of places, especially untreated rooms or when the rooms aren't where the concrete slabs are touching the street. I kind of remember in my days of going out and track record and knocking out concrete to remove some of the street noise in the studio in the south room.
Wow.
Funny enough, yeah. So there's that. But then the second actual more practical audio point of it is using this mic like on an acoustic guitar. If it's really super boomy and you're trying to cut a pop kind of track where there's a lot of track count, and engage that low cut in there, and it helps shift it up, makes it a little more just thins it out a little bit to where it'll sit in the track a little bit better and it'll cut better.
Right. Right. Yeah, you were demonstrating this on an acoustic guitar. We had a beautiful small-bodied Martin.
Correct.
And it kind of focuses, is the way that I would describe it.
Yeah.
It kind of focuses the tone of the guitar. It takes away that extraneous stuff you don't want on the bottom.
Yeah, which is, but sometimes if you're doing like a really cool acoustics track, vocal, guitar, that information is really pretty and sometimes very necessary in the track just to make a vocal and a guitar sound really, really big and beautiful. And it's a slow track, that's great. Something a little more fast-paced. All that stuff does is kind of muddy up the track, and it's too much information for you, especially in your... It's amazing how much... there's only so much sonic real estate in 2 speakers. When you think about the spectrum of like, if you build it up, you're kind of like... How much real estate you run out of real quickly when you're building up a mix, especially with a high track count.
Right, absolutely. The one that surprised me was the high cut. Because you pretty rarely see that on a microphone. I'm trying to think of another one that has a high cut built in like that, because I think most of us think, oh, we've got to have all that.
Yeah, normally you want all that stuff up there. You're usually adding it anyways, and I'm always adding it in the mix. I'm always adding 12K shelf at least 6 dB to get a vocal to be like that. That beautiful presence, so it really sticks out above the track.
The way this filter is voiced, though, when you demonstrated that, you switched it down both with the guitar and with the vocal. It's not like you lost all that detail. You didn't lose the air on top. It just kind of shaped it a little bit. And like you said, it kind of makes it almost a vintage sounding microphone.
It really does. Because when Brian was describing it to me before he loaned me a mic to try out, I was kind of scratching my head going, I don't know about that, dude, you know. But I was like, I'll be open-minded about it. And then when I actually got to hear it for myself, I was like, oh my gosh, you're really not losing the air. It's still a beautifully bright microphone. Just a really cool option. Really cool option, especially in today's modern recording of. I've mixed so many records that people have done in their living rooms, basements. Like it's the way it is now, and there's nothing wrong with that. Thank God the technology allows us to do that, and now that something like this is there, just sort of helps that artist achieve his goal even easier. So.
Right.
Great product.
Absolutely.
I'm a fan.
We're really excited about it. We've got them here already.
Really?
In stock at Sweetwater, so we're ready to go with these, and I can't wait to get my hands on one and give it a try.
Can I sign a box before it goes out or something?
There you go. Special limited edition signed. That's awesome.
I actually want to go in your warehouse. I just saw it through the glass. Like, what the hell's going on?
Let you walk out there? You can sign everything in the warehouse.
No, I didn't walk in. I was afraid I'd get ran over by one of the carts because they were like.
And they move fast. They're
they got some shipping deadlines to meet. Because can you imagine that guy that misses his his stomp box because my jerk butt was in the way of the delivery truck to get his.
We don't want that to happen.
No, I'd be mad too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Darrell, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. It was a great demo this morning. Looking forward to getting our hands on this microphone and really check it out.
Yeah. Good luck. Have fun.
Absolutely. And congratulations on your career. And we'll watch for even more meteoric rise.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you.
You too. I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.